for joining us this afternoon.
My pleasure.
The last couple of years have been incredibly busy for you. They're doing a documentary on you. There's a feature film being made on The Singularity is Near. You've started a hedge fund called Fat Cat. You're speaking for HSM all over the world.
That's true.
But you've been doing cool and amazing things for decades, and that's not a statement about your age, by the way, because you made your first inventions work at the age of 7 or 8. So my question is, what's going on in the world that makes now Ray Kurzweil's time?
Well, this is actually a good time for invention because the tools of creativity are so powerful and so available. And actually, having a track record, I can attract resources now, but it's actually the kids who can invent with very powerful tools. So a couple of kids at Stanford can, on their $1,000 laptops, create a new search engine and start a company that's now worth $150 billion. So it's not just good for me or for people who've been around for a long time. Really, the tools of creativity have been democratized. It's a very good time for innovation. And we have these communication networks, so good ideas spread very quickly. And as the technology continues to evolve and become more and more powerful, there's ever new opportunities for new business models. New applications become feasible and spread like wildfire when the enabling technologies come into place.
But you're an exception to the rule, because at 7 or 8, there weren't all these opportunities to be innovative. We didn't have access to computers like we do today. So take us back to the mindset that you had at that age and making inventions. And did you know you were a genius, as you've been called?
Well, I knew I'd be an inventor. Mm-hmm. And I do have to admit, actually, I had the idea that I would be a very successful inventor. And I've been actually thinking back, because people have been asking me this, what gave me that idea at age 5? And I don't know, but I can actually think back to the feeling I had, and I think this is a real memory, not just a memory of a memory, of the kind of feeling of magic and transcendence. I didn't have that word at age 5, but I had the feeling. If you put things together in just the right way, you could do these magical things, and you could solve problems, and ultimately you could solve any problem by putting things together in the right way. So I had this idea I wanted to be an inventor, and I remember other kids wondering, well, did they want to be a fireman, a nurse, and I always had this conceit, I know what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm.
But this was in your head, I imagine. You weren't able to articulate that verbally, you conceived it and you did it.
Well, I was building things at age 5. I built a rocket ship to the moon at age 5. My inventions weren't as realistic back then. But actually by 7 or 8, they started to work. I created a virtual reality theater. I didn't have those words either, but it was a mechanical system where I had this command station, and I could command the world through these mechanical linkages and move the sun and the stars and clouds and people and scenery on and off the stage and command it through this mechanical system. That worked pretty well, actually, at age 8. That's probably the first invention that worked well.
And what did your parents and your teachers think of you, and how were they able to manage you and instruct you and rear you?
My parents were very supportive, particularly when I got into computers, which was more like age 12, and then things started getting expensive because computer equipment was not so inexpensive back in 1960. And they were artists. They struggled. They felt I had a talent for technology and inventing, and so they managed to find the resources and for these early experiments.
So would you say that one is born a genius? It's not made, it's not acquired, it's something that one is born with?
Well, the word genius is a funny word. I think a lot of it has to do with things like courage and willingness to take risks and to accept failure. I mean, if you think back to Edison, who is somewhat of a hero of mine, he kept failing. Lots of his inventions were failures, and even the quintessential light bulb, he went through 1,000 failures with filaments that didn't work. And so that willingness to experiment and to keep trying things and to try to learn, whether even if the whole project fails or if just particular attempts to succeed fail, persistence actually pays off in the end.
And did you ever work for anybody? or were you always doing your own things?
Not really. I mean, I sold Kurzweil computer products to Xerox in 1980. So I was a Xerox executive for 2 years. But most of the time I actually just spent negotiating their investment in my next company, which was a speech recognition company. But I was actually a Xerox employee, so I had an honest job for 2 years. But basically, no.
Do you think that it's possible to manage a genius? I mean, should all executives say, gee, I'd like to have a genius or two working for me?
I think it's very important in companies now to empower people to be creative, and I don't think that's so unusual to be creative. People, even without professional backgrounds, have creative ideas, and if given the tools, which now are really available, can create things of tremendous value. And the websites that are most successful are the ones that harness the talent of millions of people. So I think that's what's different about today. It used to be you had to be recognized as, okay, this is a very creative person, this is a brilliant person, they're going to get a lot of resources. But now the tools are in everybody's hands. And you can revolutionize, whether it's web search or some other aspect of software, or create a movie and with very inexpensive equipment if you have the talent and something to say.
So you think that a bit of creative genius resides in all of us?
Yes, and I think it's important to try to give that freedom to all of your employees. And there are new business models being experimented with. Google, for example, specifically says to every employee, 20% of your time, you should just experiment with any ideas. It doesn't matter. We'll learn from it, even if it seems to be a failure. And some of those ideas catch fire, and then they get more resources. And a lot of the exciting things from Google have come from those individual projects. So everybody's empowered to be an inventor.
Besides Google, who do you think are some of the most innovative companies? Which companies do you admire?
Microsoft is also a very creative company, and I know a lot of the projects there also, well, they don't have a formal system of 20% of your time. There is a culture there to experiment and to quickly reorganize. Gates has not always been the first to adopt new business models, but they've succeeded in many different areas, including things like games, which are very culturally dependent. You wouldn't think a company like Microsoft could succeed, but they're one of the leading game companies. So that's a very creative company.
And besides Edison, whom you mentioned had a great influence on you, who else influenced you in your early years?
Well, I did correspond with Marvin Minsky, who was the father of artificial intelligence, when I was a young teenager in Queens, through actual typed correspondence on mechanical typewriters, and came to visit him and then came to study with him at MIT. And he's remained somewhat of a mentor to me for almost half a century now. We're still friends.
Great. Tell us about the movie and the documentary.
Well, I'm making a movie based on my latest book, The Singularity is Near. It's called The Singularity is Near, a true story about the future. And it's an intertwined A-line documentary with a B-line narrative story. And we felt we needed a narrative story to really dramatize what the future would be like and not just talk about it. But any story becomes very specific and too narrow, so we also needed to talk about these ideas. And so the A-line, it goes back and forth between an A-line and a B-line. And the A-line consists principally of me interviewing 20 other people, like Marvin Minsky and Alan Dershowitz and Alvin Toffler, author of Future Shock, 20 people about their ideas about the future and their ideas about my ideas. And there's also some footage of me talking to the audience, explaining what the future will be like, about the law of accelerating returns, exponential growth of information technology, and what impact that will have on every aspect of our lives. And then there's intertwined this story that illustrates it. And the story is the story of Ramona, which actually starts in a true past, with some footage showing me creating this virtual person, which I demonstrated at the 2001 TED conference. And then Ramona goes in the future. She becomes more and more realistic, more and more human-like, more and more independent. It's kind of a Pinocchio story. She combats an attack of self-replicating nanobots. She makes some mistakes and then gets Department of Homeland Security tries to turn her off, so she presses her rights as a person and hires Alan Dershowitz to establish her rights as a person, even though she's virtual. And the judge says, okay, I'll grant you legal rights as a person if you can pass a Turing test. That's where you need to be indistinguishable from an actual biological human with a test involving instant messaging. She goes and gets coaching from Tony Robbins, who's going to play himself, to become more human. At the same time, Barry and Felicia Ptolemy, a very talented documentary film team, are making a movie
Yes.
about my life and career and ideas from an independent perspective and how other people react to my ideas. And so I don't actually know what that movie is going to look like, but I think that's going to be very interesting as well.
It sure will. Is it just coincidence that these two films are being made at the same time?
I've actually been approached by a number of documentary filmmakers. I started working with a couple who were going to do this movie that I ended up making of this intertwined A line and B line. I didn't like the way it was going, and I ended up writing the script for that movie and working with Anthony Waller and Toshi Hu, two talented filmmakers, on that movie. But at the same time, Barry and Felicia Ptolemy approached me. They seemed to have a good understanding of my ideas, and I liked their attitude. And it seemed interesting, actually, that part of their movie would be the making of my movie.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed to have good synergy, so both projects happened.
Great. So part of the documentary is actually about the making of the feature film.
That's right, yeah.
That's great. Can you tell us about Fat Cat and how that's doing?
Under SEC rules, I can't tell you how it's doing, but I'm enjoying running it. But we have prominent individuals like Vinod Khosla backing it. Mike Brown, who is Chief Financial Officer of Microsoft and Chairman of NASDAQ, is an investor and also on our board. And we are using my background of pattern recognition, finding subtle patterns in the market to try to predict the movement of stocks, really on a high-frequency basis. And there are patterns there that you can recognize and exploit. So that's the philosophy.
Are you the fund manager?
The computers actually make the decisions, but yeah, I'm running Fat Cat.
Right.
But we have a team basically of mathematicians and computer scientists.
I know from prior conversations that you have a very unique way of problem solving. And you take that expression, I'm going to sleep on it, quite literally. Can you tell us about the way you solve problems?
Well, I kind of fell into this technique, but I've been doing it for over 20 years and kind of refined this technique of lucid dreaming to help solve problems. And so, at least when I don't have to wake up with an alarm clock, which did not include this morning, but when I go to sleep, I assign myself a problem. And it could really be any kind of problem. It could be an interpersonal issue, a business strategy. Should we hire this person? How do we negotiate this deal? How do we approach this market? It could be, how do I organize this material to write this chapter of a book? It could be a math problem. How do we solve this equation for Fat Cat or some other pattern, signal processing problem I'm working on? And I try not to solve it because that would shut down your thinking about it. But I try to think, what do I know about it? What form would a solution take? And I then go to sleep. And I find myself, if I wake up in the middle of the night, that I am dreaming very obliquely and sometimes in very strange ways about the issue. Now, Freud said that when we dream, our sensors, C-E-N-S-O-R-S, are relaxed. So the things that we think of that are taboo to think about during the day, we'll think about in dreams. So things that are culturally taboo, socially taboo, and sexually taboo will come up in dreams. Another thing, but there's also professional taboos. Like can't solve a signal processing problem using those formulas, and linguistics doesn't use those rules, are also relaxed. So you can really think of strange new ways of solving problems. But there's something else that's not working in your dreams, which is your rational faculties. So when the elephant walks through the wall, the strangest thing about it is not that the elephant walked through the wall, but that you don't find it strange. The elephant walked through the wall. It's just, it's a matter-of-fact occurrence. You're not able to rationally evaluate ideas. So that's where the next stage comes in, which is the lucid dreaming, which is that in-between stage in the morning, in between being awake and sleeping, that kind of twilight zone. You're still in the dream. You still can access the dream. The dream is kind of going on. You can influence the dream now. You're aware that you're in a bed. So a lot of people formulate the rational thought, oh, I've got a very busy day. I better get up and not waste time in bed. But actually, it's a very creative time. And I'll come back then to this problem that I assigned myself. And now I can access these dream ideas, and some are just too strange. But now I do have my rational faculties, because I'm conscious enough to be rational. And I can evaluate the ideas and see how the strange idea, actually, that does make sense. And I'll come up with new insights. And if I have an important decision to make and I'm really not sure, I'd never try to force a decision. I'll go through this process, and very often, it's not perfect, but I will wake up with a real sense of confidence in one decision or another, or I'll have some insight. I've come up with inventions this way and then filed patent applications. And so it is a very good way to harness creative thinking.
It sounds like a way of life for you. I mean, it's a pattern and a habit, something that you do regularly.
It's been very useful, and I've kind of refined the technique over the years.
I think everything you do sounds like great fun, but what do you do for fun that's outside of what you do as part of your career and profession?
Nothing too dramatic. I mean, I like hiking, I like walking, I like bicycling, which is a time to just be contemplative and let your mind free. I like spending time with my family. We'll go on hikes and do light climbing of mountains and things like that.
Is there a question that you thought I would ask you that I didn't ask you, or something that you would hope somebody would ask you that they haven't asked you yet?
Am I having fun yet?
Are you having fun yet?
I'm having fun, but this is real life, and I take on projects, and then they become a responsibility because there are other people involved. There are investors, there are employees, and when you have responsibilities, you worry about things. But I try to actually look at myself in the third person, and if I find myself getting down about something, I'll try to then look at my person. Okay, there's this guy, he's getting down about this, but he's really had problems like this before. And generally, I try to get outside myself and not take these problems too seriously. And also, I have an innate confidence that problems can be solved, and I think I got that from my parents and just my family's philosophy that the ideas are out there to solve problems. Big problems like curing disease, or little problems like how you can get out of this social dilemma that you have this afternoon. And you can really think about how to solve these problems. And sometimes I think, though, of when I was growing up, the popular show was the Ed Sullivan Show, and there was this one act where this guy would put plates on sticks and twirl them, and the plate would then twirl on its own. Then he'd put up another stick, and then he would have 12 plates, and they're all kind of twirling, but one would start wobbling, and so he would go back and twirl it, put up 6 more plates, and when they went to a commercial break, he was still putting up plates. And they would twirl on their own for a while, but occasionally they needed attention. So I sometimes feel like that person rushing from one project to another to keep these plates going. They will go on their own for a while, but they get wobbly occasionally and need attention. So
that's a great analogy. And having said that, what's the next big challenge for you? Besides keeping the plates going.
I do get drawn into new projects. I've got involved with a very exciting cancer project at MIT, which may have identified the cancer stem cell, which people talk about but haven't actually identified, and we actually think we have pictures of them. So that's an interesting project. So now we can actually, it's kind of like the queen bee, that that's really the cells you need to kill, because if you just kill the cancer cells, it's going to grow back. So I keep getting drawn into new projects. I'm doing some mentoring of little companies. One has a robot that can actually see, looks around, and can actually build a 3-dimensional map of the world and then navigate in an unplanned environment like a factory that's not planned, because all the robots in the world today require highly constrained environments. This can actually operate in the free world. So I'm mentoring companies like that. So there's always something interesting to do. The new ideas keep coming up more quickly because there's so many new opportunities because of this acceleration that's really fueled by the exponential growth of information.
You're doing great things for business and technology, and I would say thank you on behalf of all of us who are impacted by the work that you do. Thank you, and thank you for talking to us this afternoon.
It's my pleasure.